Today, we will talk about relational trauma and happiness with author Jana Wilson from New Mexico. Jana is the author of Wise Little One, Learning to Love and Listen to My Inner Child, who is actually launching today. What a wonderful coincidence for us. Jana is a victim of childhood abuse and trauma. She had a mystical experience at 12, and she entered a very unique connection with her inner self, and now is writing about this extraordinary experience in her book. Jana trained with Deepak Chopra and Dr. Brian Weiss, and she's the creator of the emotional healing system. That sounds very interesting and exciting. So welcome to our Open to Happiness podcast, Jana.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So you've been through a little bit of a journey yourself. Would you like to maybe start by sharing who are you and how was your journey in life so far?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for asking. Yes, so there's an adverse childhood experience test that clinicians give clients, and it's only 10 questions. And I remember, I was probably in my 30s when I first found this test, and I took it, and I scored 10 out of 10, which means, I had a lot of trauma. And, it woke me up, though. It's interesting. It's like the gifts of the darkness, right? They push us to the light. And I was born on the winter solstice, which is really one of the most auspicious, if not the most auspicious day of the year, because it's the darkest day, but then light trumps, right? It triumphs and the light comes back. And paganism, it was the high holy day. And so I've committed my life really to bringing light to darkness. I was trained by New York Times bestselling author Debbie Ford, and my childhood was something that was holding me back. Nicoletta, in college, I started to realize, there were really people who were functioning normally, and that could be possible for me, but I had to find the teachers, the people who could point me in that direction. And so, as the universe supports us always, I got a job with Maybelline Cosmetics. I was 20 years old. I was on a trip, and a book fell off a bookstore, just fell off a shelf, landed on my feet, and it was written in 1935, the copyright. One of the chapters was Law of Attraction. So it set me on a course, right, but my childhood, not to give too many spoiler alerts about the book, was pretty intense. My dad was an alcoholic. My mother was mentally ill. She had lost her father as a child and never got the therapy she needed. And so she continued to derail. She was bipolar with borderline personality disorder. She would have attempts of suicide. My father beat her, terribly. And of course, I witnessed all that. And then I experienced also abuse at their hands as well. My mother and my father, my brother as well. He was treated much worse than I. So, when you go through that kind of stuff, it's probably similar in research and things I've read to a child that's born in a war-torn area. Right? There's no stability. So of course there was developmental trauma, which is really what we know so much of, that birth to 7 years. But one of the leading research now is showing that trauma occurs. Of course, we've known this with a drug addict mother who's taking heroin. The baby's going to be a heroin addict. My mother was clinically depressed and being beaten while she was pregnant with me. So I was taking a steady diet of cortisol and stress hormones. And so, of course, I came out back then. I'm 57. In the 60s, they didn't have ADD or ADHD, but I'm sure I would have been diagnosed with that, right? So it was a tough childhood. It was, I had suicide ideation as a child. Right before 12 years old, I was really seriously contemplating it. I believe that's why spirit pulled me out of my body and reminded me of the truth. And the truth is, those are not your parents, and that is not your life. And I felt this peace that I mean, even talking about it now, the grace that comes over me, my heart, it's a connection that I actually bow to the trauma because it gave me a deep spiritual connection.
What a beautiful story. Of course, it starts in pain and suffering, like it often happens.
Yeah.
But look where you find yourself today and what's coming out of this and how you're sharing your learnings with the world. So you've started in a domestic violent home, just like me, with an alcoholic father. In my case, my mother was codependent. We have a lot in common. And you know how many like us are in the world? I mean, I see this in my therapy practice every day. It's much more than we could have imagined, but people have been afraid to talk about their own experience up until now. So we are only starting to have this conversation. So what happened next? You're reading this and you're feeling what? Which way you're going? I would imagine that you take this as a sign. It's like a messenger being sent onto your path.
The out-of-body experience.
Just having the book in the library, I was thinking about sharing a bit about how has that shaped the future.
So much. I mean, this book, it was called You, and the book was all about, learning to love yourself. Well, I had never heard that. And I was raised in the South, in the United States, very Bible Belt, very Southern family. And, we were taught, a certain way. And I was breaking out of that because the out-of-body experience at 12 was so profound that it took me into such a higher state of consciousness. I would even say probably the highest that we know of, which is unity consciousness. I was one with the cosmos. I could see that I was stardust. I was connected to everything. Yet I was playing a role as this little human child that was suffering and these parents, but I really wasn't a part of them. I was aware of what was happening. Now, at the time, I didn't know. All I knew is I had a really direct connect. But of course, at 12, by the time I'm 13 and a half or so, that started to kind of go away. And then, of course, I'm a teenager and there's smoking pot and checking out and disassociating and just trying to survive, right?
Yeah.
The childhood, I had so much complex post-traumatic stress at that point, that it was just, so I'm 20, I get this job. I mean, the fact that I even went away to school was miraculous because here I should be a statistic. My family was labeled white trash. We were looked down upon. We had no money. My mom lived off the state with food stamps and subsidies from the state. She didn't work. She was on disability because she was mentally ill. I had to wear the same clothes over. I mean, there was a lot of shame, right? And being put these labels. So that out-of-body awakening was life-saving because it was like Spirit was saying, I have a purpose for you and you are not that. And so I began to just have an idea. Wait a minute. What if I am not my family of origin? What if I'm really not, all these labels and these things I've identified with? And just that thought alone, I think, began to open and expand my consciousness so that the teachers, the books, the things could appear and I would recognize them. I wouldn't be afraid, right? Because I was very indoctrinated in religion, which told me, stranger danger, don't believe anything, that's of the devil, this is wrong. And so I began to go down a path that was woo-woo at 12 years old. So it was really remarkable. And the book, let me show it to you. So this is the book and it's called You. I don't know if Francis is a woman or a man, but the copyright, you can see it's so old. But this book, it opened my mind to, of course, the 3 vital laws. The first one, the law of attraction.
Yeah.
And I began to use my consciousness, my mind, to renew and think things differently and begin to manifest. But I had been manifesting my whole life. In my book, I share, I think, and you could probably relate with this, when we go through a lot of trauma, it's natural to disassociate. We want to
Absolutely.
flee from the experience, right? So
Absolutely.
my imagination became my superpower. And children, the wise little one, the inner child, loves imagination, right? Einstein said imagination is more important than knowledge because imagination will take you where knowledge never could. So in my imaginary world, I am living the life I'm living today. And I started doing it as a child with my Barbie dolls.
How was the journey
So,
from 20 up until this moment when you're launching this book? What happened in between?
that's a great question. So, I find this book, it starts waking me up. I had a track record up until that point, which it wasn't many years, but, from say 16 years old to now I'm 20 for the 4 years. So that seems like such a long period when you're at that age because so
Yeah.
much is happening. I really made a lot of choices that reflected my core false belief. I call it my operating system. My childhood, developed us, right? It's kind of molded us to believe who we are and what we're good enough for. And of course, I didn't believe I was good enough, worthy, valuable. So how did I treat myself? The same way, right? So I gave myself away to a lot of men. I became very promiscuous. I didn't value myself. I'd been sexualized and molested as a child. So I was very sexual from a young age. And so I began to act all that out. And of course, that just solidified the shame, the core shame that I felt at my very core. Even though I'd had that spiritual experience, that was kind of in the back burner of my subconscious. I wasn't really aware. So I got pregnant a few times. I was raped. I had several abortions. I would feel very guilty and ashamed about myself. So I lived in this low vibration of guilt and shame. And then I would get sick, I was constantly conjunctivitis. I couldn't see, what do I don't want to look at?
Yeah.
I would have throat issues. I wasn't speaking up, telling men no, advocating for myself. And I was definitely prey for predators. And I called my mom, and, I had a very turbulent time. My mom put a gun to my head when I was 8 years old. My mom and I, but no one's inherently all bad. And my mom had a lot of love. And when she was healthy, meaning she was coming out of the hospital rewired, they would rewire her brain. Literally what we know now of neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
Electroconvulsive therapy can do the same thing. However, as you know, if the patient doesn't change their environment externally and continue to rewire the brain with new beliefs and thoughts and behaviors, they fall back.
Absolutely.
So mom would fall back into her old behaviors, let my dad come back, self-loathe, do all the crazy making. She wouldn't stay on her meds, she would, but little impressionable me was getting downloaded with some pretty intense teachings from a young age. To give you an example, my mom would come back from the hospital and be very interested in, say, Raymond Moody and near-death experiences, or Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, or astrology, and she would just, and I was fascinated, of course, I'm just a child. She was just pouring all of this into me. So it was really cool. But going back to 20, I call her, she comes, and we really mended. It was one of the most healing times of my life. My mom showed up for me finally, and she helped me get through school. She supported me. I ended up, getting on my feet. I get pregnant. The guy's an alcoholic, just like dad, repeating the pattern.
Yeah.
I decide to keep the baby. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to keep this baby because I know this baby's my teacher. I felt like, Kahlil Gibran, The Prophet, the book, The Prophet. Are you familiar with it?
No.
It's a beautiful set of poetry that was done like in the 40s by Kahlil Gibran. I think he's a Lebanese poet. And the poetry is beautiful, but it's like a prophet speaking, and he speaks about children. And he says, your children are not your children. They're a life longing for itself. They come through you, not from you. And I remember that poem being in my head when I got pregnant, and I was like, this is my teacher. And I've got to wake up and I've got to be a cycle breaker. I have to figure out what happened in childhood. Do not repeat. Do not do what they did. And I've got to do it on my own. I've got no man here with me. So I got really serious. As soon as I became pregnant, it was like, I've got to heal. And A Course in Miracles came into my life. This is late 80s. Marianne Williamson, Deepak Chopra, Wayne Dyer. I mean, all these teachers. And I was very blessed. I was living in South Florida. Wayne Dyer I knew him personally. He lived in Boca Raton. I was living down there. I was really starting to get immersed with so much personal development and spiritual teachings that's all that mattered to me. It was like, this is life. I got to do this. My life depends on this. And even working today with clients, I remind them, listen, this is not some light endeavor we're going down. This is your life depends on you doing this work. And this work requires daily practice. We don't arrive to some place in the future. You know, I've got a book out now. I'm married my beloved. I've transformed all that lemon and made some really sweet lemonade, but I'm still human, right? It's still the experience of, you know, chopping wood and carrying water and just being human.
Yeah, it is. Because essentially the pain and the joy are only two ends of the same human experience. And it's hard to pinpoint where they are. They may be just like the universe, you know, always expanding. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, that's a beautiful point, because I don't think many people know this. I kind of get really science geeky, especially when it supports spirituality. And, you know, the CERN, the Hadron Collider in Switzerland, when they finally got it working, I think it was in 2016, to duplicate the Big Bang, right? Talking about, you know, the opposites of pain and joy, they're the same, you know, opposite ends of the same experience, right? Chaos and order, let's say.
Yeah.
When they got it working, they did a beautiful documentary. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to see it. It's called Particle Fever. And in the documentary, if you're really a spiritual being, you're going to see what this is telling us. And so this physicist theorizes the God particle, and he does a mathematical equation so that this is how the origins of the universe. What is God? The God particle. And he's alive. He's a theoretical physicist. He sees his theory realized once the collider starts going. And the data comes back and it tells us exactly what the ancient teachings have always told us. Buddhism definitely tells us this. Find your balance, find the midline. The God particle is there's chaos and there's order. And it'll never change. Yes, the universe is expanding, and we could call that order and expansion, but there's also destruction and decay and devolution at the same time, right? So it's this delicate balance in our own lives too. That mirrors the microcosm to that macrocosm is, yeah, I'm balancing chaos sometimes and then coming back to peace and order. And it's the dance.
It is indeed. This is life, isn't it?
So true.
But it's very difficult to come into a state of self-regulation, of balance, of yoga, of union, whatever you want to call it. In medical terms, we call it homeostasis, but it can be equilibrium or whatever. Everyone will have a different word for it. It's kind of the same thing. I would say that it's difficult to return back into a state of being at peace, being yourself, when you go through such turmoil and abuse and trauma. In your view, has there been room for happiness throughout all of these years in your life? I would like to maybe break it in stages, up until 12 when you had the mystical experience, then from 12 onwards to 20, and maybe from 20 to up until now. How do you talk about the relationship you have with happiness, and how has that changed?
So birth to 12, you know, the gift of when we incarnate and we're a child is we have innocence, we have childlike essence, regardless if the soul's coming in with karmic debt. And I think that we get some grace, in those early years, especially, even though I chose parents, my soul chose parents who were broken, but I also had beautiful experiences. I talk about it in the book. There was a family friend who took us to Disney World, or my grandmother who would take me for breakfasts, or, there were these little, my happiness set point, and every family has one, was low, for sure. Right. So, arbitrary scale 0 to 10, I would say I was a 2. So there wasn't a lot of happiness. I found happiness in nature, climbing trees. I found happiness in moments of rapture with the divine. As a child, I wanted to grow up and be a preacher, a minister. I was very connected to spirit. I liked to preach to the neighborhood kids. So I think, my nature is to be joyful, enlightened, lighten up, right? So those years, I think there were. Then from 12 to 20 were probably the hardest too, because now I'm identifying and comparing and competing with other women, other girls, always feeling less than, not good enough. It's extremely insecure, like to the, so much insecurity. And then from 20 till now.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yes, just increasing the happiness. So I'd say, like, if I was a 2 at 0 to 12, maybe it didn't change. And then as I got older and it, having my daughter, of course, one of the most wonderful days of my life, even though I was scared as hell, 22 years old, having a baby on my own, I would, it definitely went up from there. She's, it makes me emotional. She's my joy, she's my everything. And then, and now I live at like a 9 or 10 most days. I just have so much joy in my heart and life. And it's been practice though, right? Just practicing heart math. I'm a heart math facilitator. You're familiar with heart math?
No.
Heart math is an institute here in the US and Northern California that began about 30 years ago, measuring the electromagnetic field of the heart. And they were really interested because the heart is 5,000 times stronger than the brain. So the electromagnetic field of the heart, to give you an example of that, reaches about 3 to 5 feet from the body. We might call that your aura, or that's that field of energy. When someone kind of gets near, you're like, oh, I can feel their energy. Mm-hmm. We start to blend our energies together. So that field of energy is about 3 to 5 feet. That's where they get the 5,000 times stronger. The cranium's an inch. So the electromagnetic field, when they measure it, is only an inch. From the heart, it's 3 to 5 feet. Well, now Mother Earth, it emanates from, why are we inhabitable when we're closer to the sun than Mars? Well, because Mars doesn't have an electromagnetic field like we do. So Mother Earth's electromagnetic field shoots out 400,000 miles, and then it hits, and of course the northern lights, it's the solar flare hits our magnetic field. So heart mass hypothesis or theory is, get enough people doing these intelligent energy management techniques, raising their happiness, breathing in throughout the day consciously, slow and deep, about 4 seconds on the in and out breath, and imagining things that they're appreciative of or grateful for, and sustaining that thought for a few minutes, just flooding the body, getting the vagus nerve to fire, the nervous system to balance. And then you begin to emit this really strong electromagnetic field. If enough of us do it, to give you an example, at 9/11, when the towers went down in the US, enough people were in their heart with compassion towards the US and what was happening, that random generators that read the field on the planet, there's like a dozen of them, all began to put the same data out, like the same numbers, because all of us were, feeling in a vibration, a frequency the same, and it was actually measurable. So, now I live that way anytime, because I'm a meditator. I'm aware I'm lost in thought and worried about the future or rehashing the past and not present. Of course, I come back into present moment, and I have free will. I can think about anything. So I begin to breathe slow and deep, because of course, when we're in stress mode, thinking just a thought creates stress. The heart, beat goes faster and shallow, and I get incoherent. So as soon as I get coherent again, the heart sends all these messages to my brain and says, hey, everything's good. Like go clean out this plaque. Our bodies are miraculous. Like, they are working for us. Our immune system gets boosted. When we live in a state of fear, obviously that's stress, and our body shuts down. So heart math hypothesis, if we get enough people learning these simple techniques to do throughout the day, they're not meditation because your eyes are open. You could be talking to somebody doing it. That will be more heart-centered, more heart-connected, and it'll raise the consciousness of the planet.
And consciousness is love, and love is happiness. Would you like maybe to give us your own definition of happiness? When are you happy? What does it mean to be happy for you?
Oh, that's a good question. So happiness, what does it mean? It means, for me, when I'm connected to my innocence and my lovability and my essence, little Jana, the wise little one, my emotional self is the inner child. And when I listen to her and I honor her, and I'm very, it's a process of reparenting. So when I'm in that bond with myself, I'm the most happiest, so it's an inner job. Happiness is an inside job. It's not anybody else's responsibility. I am 100% responsible for my happiness. No one else can make me feel happy. That's a choice I make. So I'm always aware that if I'm feeling a more wounded feeling, I would call it, like anxiety or frustration or, depression, or if I'm feeling guilt or any of those wounded feelings, I'm disconnected from her. So that's my kind of red light to go, oh, it's time to connect and find out, what am I saying, doing, thinking that's creating these feelings? So I take 100% responsibility. And if someone else, has said or done something that's upsetting me, then I know how to have a crucial conscious conversation, right? Like, hey, not you made me feel unhappy. No, when you said or did this, I noticed I felt this way and told myself a story. And then that story made me feel unhappy. Was that your intent? And then they get to say, oh God, no, like you totally misread that, oh, okay, thank you. But I don't blame them, right? I don't put them so happiness is an inside job. Yeah.
Yeah. So you feel happy when you connect with your true self, with your inner child, with what's pure in you.
Pure.
Yes. Yeah. The question is now, if the child inside of you has been hurt, has been through so much relational trauma, you talk about some members of your family struggling themselves, naturally handling you, not from the most conscious, place. That's clear. Is it comforting for you to actually connect with the inner child when the inner child has been hurt? I appreciate that you're learning to love and listen to the inner child, but what if the inner child is talking about her pain, how she feels scared, how she feels not observed, not important, not significant, how she feels that maybe no one notices her, no one is there for her, no one is able to really observe her needs and fulfill her wishes? What do you do then?
Yeah, so the work I teach in reparenting the inner child is, we have an intent to be a healthy adult. to learn how to be the parent maybe we didn't have, mother and father, right? So when I'm in an intent to be a healthy, loving adult to myself, what that means is my only role, my only purpose in that is to receive love from spirit, from my connection to spiritual guidance, right? And that connection of love and meaning and purpose that spirit gives me, then my role as a loving adult is to give it to my wounded child. Now, what you're talking about when you say, you know, all those feelings of the sad, hurting child, there's two children, there's two inner children, and the way I teach, there's a core child that just wants to give their gifts and talents to the world, but they got conditioned to believe they weren't good enough, or some false belief, right? So the core child feels pain, but pain's different than suffering. And so in my teachings with Deepak, and this comes from the Vedas, you know, and Buddhism, it was also taken out of this teachings, is we suffer because we don't know who we are. So if I don't know who I am, that I am a divine being, and I just think I'm just this human personality with this story of a childhood, I'm going to suffer, right? So, but to feel pain in life is inevitable. Someone dies, you're going to grieve and have sorrow, right? You lose a pet, you're going to grieve. If you, you know, somebody says or does something mean, you're going to feel heartbreak and heartache. You're going to feel lonely sometimes. That's a core painful feeling, because if you're not connected to spirit, I mean, if you're around other people who aren't connected and you want to connect, say they're on their phones or whatever, you feel lonely, right? And then helplessness over others, because we can't control other people. If we think we can, that's what codependency is all about, right? We become very controlling and manipulative. So we're helpless over others. Those are painful feelings. Wounded feelings, the wounded child wants to get love, avoid pain, and feel safe. So the wounded part is who you were talking about predominantly, the emotions that you were saying, and that's all the wounded feelings. Now, wounded feelings happen from a story. So it could be happening from outside of us. You mentioned something like, oh, there's no one to, you know, I'm lonely, there's no one to connect with, or someone's being mean to me or whatever. It has nothing to do with me. But if I create a story and I internalize it, now I'm no longer a loving adult. I'm just an adult child. I'm 55 going on 5, right? So I'm behaving like an adult child. And we see that all the time, right? Road rage, people behave, you know, anger, drama queens. We see people addicted to emotion. And when we get addicted to emotion, the same receptor sites in the brain are firing that a heroin addict fires. So we're addicted. We're looking for that hit, that rush. And it takes a lot of conscious work and meditating, becoming very mindful of the mind to master it, so you don't go into false narratives that create that suffering, right? So if, you know, I gave an example a moment ago, but I'll do it again. If I'm dealing with a wounded feeling, such as, you know, someone gave me a bad review on the book, a friend, or I don't know, somebody just made a, you know, and I start telling myself, oh, you know, they don't respect me, or they, you know, they were mean to me, and I internalize their actions, then I'm going to suffer, right? And when I catch it, you ask the question, how do I handle it? I reparent myself. I come back online. I went offline because I was an adult child in that moment. So I come back online, I connect to my spiritual guidance, and I say, okay, I want to be there for myself. See, it's no one else's job to listen to me, to hear me, to say nice things to me, to do beautiful acts of service for me, give me gifts, spend quality time. It's my job. So I don't look into the outer world and go, oh, they're not doing this for me, right? Because that's a taker. That's somebody who's hooking into others and making them responsible for their feelings. That's classic codependency. Of course, takers attract caretakers who say, oh, yeah, I'm such a good person. Let me give myself up for you. You know, so I'm not interested in that kind of toxic triangulation and, you know, dynamic. So I just am self-contained, and it's what I teach. I'm not perfect at it. Of course, there's people that are very close to me who can still push my buttons and hurt me, and even strangers. I still have work to do. but predominantly my relationship with my feelings is one that I'm 100% responsible for. And I have tools that I teach, steps like easy to learn, step 1, step 2, step 3. And what I do when I'm feeling that is I pull the child in, I apologize. I am so sorry. I use Ho'oponopono, part of the Hawaiian Huna tradition. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. And I see little Jana. I put pictures of her everywhere on my phone, on my desk, on my bathroom mirror, next to my bed. She is very much a part of my life. And when I relate, Nicoletta, with her as like a third person, like, hi, precious little girl, you've suffered long enough. You know, it's never too late to have a happy childhood. What can I do for you today? That kind of connection, that's where happiness comes. And that's where responsibility for making myself crazy, you know, because that's what we do.
Yes.
We can be our own worst enemy, you know.
Absolutely. Yes, without doubt. So would this be at the core of your emotional healing system, the course that you're teaching?
Yeah. So I went about, you know, I just thought there's people out there who know, and I'm the type of person like, I don't, you know, I need you to tell me exactly what do I need to be doing every day. And so they really weren't saying that. Now, Deepak and the Chopra Center said it more than anybody. When you went to one of their events, they would give a daily practices. So when you went home, you knew what you were supposed to be doing every day. So I was like, I really like that. Well, it wasn't complete for me, right? It was meditate, of course, do embodiment practices, recapitulation, you know, lie in bed at night and recap your day, be the witness, you know, create detachment from the stories, and all that was beautiful. It was foundational. So the emotional healing system foundation is know who you are, that you are a divine being, and know that you are the creator of this life. You are the leading lady or leading man of your movie. And it is based, you're not seeing anything in the outer world as it is. You're seeing it as you are, an inner reflection of your beliefs and thoughts and, you know, everything that you. So I always liken it to the brain's like a movie reel at the theater. And the reel has the tape of the past, and it shoots through the lens, projects it out onto the screen called your movie, right? So I teach people that it is up to you to extract the past, the wisdom. What did you learn? And then bring it so it has wisdom, because if you don't learn the lesson, you have ignorance. You just keep doing the same thing, right? And then you begin to see a different movie when you take that kind of level of self-responsibility. So that's foundational. Then we teach psychosynthesis. So people don't understand how the psyche is divided into parts, right? Sometimes I'm a teacher. Sometimes I'm a grandma. Sometimes I'm a wife. Sometimes I'm silly and irreverent. Sometimes I'm serious and right. Like everything has an opposite. So when I show, in the workbook, my husband and I are actually writing the book now, the emotional healing system, but this is the workbook clients receive. And on one of the pages is a big circle, and the circle is for them to, it's called the 360-degree personality. And there's light and dark, right? And if people come to me, they bought some lie, you know, that society's conditioned them. You're supposed to just be on one side of that circle, the good side. There's right and there's wrong, and there's good and there's bad. And you can't tell me any different. And that's not true. There's both. And it's us who are labeling right and wrong, good and bad. I've met people who are dying of cancer. It was the greatest thing in their life. Woke them up, right? To take care of themselves, to heal. So psychosynthesis teaching the synthesizing of the psyche, that I'm everything sometimes. Alanis Morissette, the famous Canadian singer, she did this work with Debbie Ford that I trained with. She wrote a beautiful song called Everything. I love it. I always play it for clients because she's in classic Alanis style. I'm the moodiest baby, and I'm the most brilliant woman, and I'm the an asshole, and I'm, like she goes back and forth, back and forth. And then in the chorus, she says, you see everything, all my light and all my dark, and you're still here. It's like, that's the higher self. That's the part of us that's connected to spirit that has a choice. Either I'm going to love and accept that I can be not my nicest self sometimes and forgive her, or I'm going to push to always try to be good. And that's impossible. Right. And try to get love from externals and, just make peace with myself. So that's a big part of it. I mean, that's life-changing for people to face their shadows, Nicolette. I have them sit in front of me, and we say things like, you are a manipulative, checked out, bad mother, just like your mother. Say they have a mother wound, and they're crying and they're saying these ugly things that they think, but they never say out loud usually. So we really bring the light to all the darkness and bring it out. Do a lot of hypnotherapy, and then teaching them to go back to core, experiences, things that happened when they were little. What meaning did they make it mean? What story did they tell themselves? What is the false belief? Then we move them into the reparenting, how to connect with the inner child, teach the steps, and then envisioning, how to envision your future, seeing that movie screen of your life. What kind of woman could do that? I had this book in me 25 years, and I had a story of, I'm not smart enough. I didn't finish college. I can't write a book. And I had to let that go. I had to die to be reborn, right? I had to keep letting that go. You are smart enough, and you're smart enough to hire a good editor, and you're smart enough to do this, and you're smart. So finally, right, of just working for so many years to say, what kind of woman could write a book? Transparent. A lot of people are interviewing me, or like, it's amazing you share all this. Like you're not, listen, if I hadn't healed that, I couldn't share it. I would be worried what people thought about me, but I don't care what people think about me. I only care what I think. So.
Yeah, very interesting the way you work, and it sounds really beautiful.
Thank you so much.
I bet
it is.
that your clients get through this work with you, they get through a very, very interesting journey themselves, coming back to their true self, going through that level of self-discovery that is so important for our healing, and then growing finally into the people that they want to be. So you've been through all of these years of, experience and struggle and joy and pain, and now you're publishing your book, which I would imagine it's a collection of your learnings throughout life. Can you please share towards the end now of our podcast with our listeners, what are your best 3 teachings that are at the core of your book right now?
Well, consciousness is everything. That if, often this seems like such an esoteric concept to most people, they overcomplicate it. And all we're saying is, again, everything that you're seeing on the movie of your life is based on your consciousness, on your awareness, right? There's infinite possibilities, of being an author or being, all the possibilities of something you could dream are there, the potential. So it's kind of like washing the brain. I teach RPM. One of my teachers, David G., he's a famous meditation teacher. He headed up the Chopra Center for many years, and I was under his direction when I was there. He always said, rise, pee, meditate. So get up, empty your bladder, and sit. You do it before you do anything, because it's like going, like I'm going to brush my teeth every day. It's spiritual hygiene. I would never not think of doing physical hygiene. So of course, I'm creating this world from the inside out, not from the outside in. So I want my inner world to be renewed, to be fresh, so I can open my eyes and I can see the beauty. I can see, things that I wouldn't see if my mind was filled with chaos, right? So that's number one, more important than anything. I tell people I won't work with you if you don't commit to a practice, right? Because it just doesn't work. The second thing that's popping in my head right now, it's kind of interesting, so I'm going to go with it. I'm going to trust that maybe it's spirit guiding this, is I'm at a place now in my career where so many of the issues that we deal with are come back to, how can I reconcile this from the past? How can I forgive my parents or whatever happened to me? I just worked with a young woman who was a product of rape. And, imagine what she felt in the womb. The unwanted was her core false belief. And I told her when I talked to her on the phone and did an interview, I will only work with you if you read this book and it resonates for you. And I told her to read Dr. Brian Weiss's book, who I trained with, Many Lives, Many Masters. And the reason why I'm doing that is because so much can't be explained in this lifetime. We have to take a broader perspective, in my opinion, to say, I'm not a human with this story. I'm actually a soul. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. I'm here in Earth School. My creator gives me infinite opportunity to learn lessons, right? So in the reincarnation perspective, we see that we are eternal, we are immortal, we are divine, and we made a choice. When I shifted, Nicolette, and started looking at my childhood from this perspective, it healed me, because then I thought, well, reincarnation says I chose my parents because I had debt and I had lessons. Wow, I learned a lot of them because I am a cycle breaker. I'm not continuing them. And so, yay, I'm a pretty badass soul. I started to look at myself not as a broken white trash little poor girl, but as like a soul that was pretty strong and pretty capable. And I got excited, and then I hid it, I can't tell a lot of people because they'll think I'm of the devil, or, again, especially in the US, I don't know, I mean, Christianity is still a pretty big religion, and it teaches a certain way of believing and not to question it. So I was scared, even coming out in my book, knowing family members and people where I came from are going to read it. And I think to myself, oh, what are they going to think when they read that part? But I don't care, obviously. It's my own opinion. So number 2 is be open. A mind open can expand. A mind, and once it's opened, it can't go back to its original state. So stay open to the mystery. We don't know much of anything. Humans, they say, only know 4% of the known universe. That means 96%, we haven't even figured it out yet. I mean, I've heard spiritual teachers say we're in the boondocks of the Milky Way, like we don't know much. And I like that. That's freeing to me, because I don't need certainty. I fell in love with the unknown a long time ago. And when you fall in love with the unknown, that's when magic happens. That's when miracles happen, because you have faith. You have the most ultimate faith and trust that the universe has your back, and it's just guiding you, and it makes me emotional, supporting you in every way. I couldn't do this deep work with my clients if I hadn't went to the depths of darkness within myself, of self-loathing and hatred and, all the things that happened to me, not identifying with them, right? And loving myself, finding my innocence, finding my deservability, because I know I'm a good person and my intent is good. So consciousness is everything. Keep your mind open. We live in a very mysterious universe. Anything's possible. And the last one I would say is, reparenting yourself, falling in love with the little guy or girl you once were, and realizing if you went through any trauma, even if it was, they call big T and little t trauma, like a little t trauma is still a big trauma to a child. They weren't seen or heard. Parents live vicariously through them. They didn't model good boundaries. They didn't modulate their anger and their rage, and they went screamed at them, and things like this, like, are big. I had a client once her parents were great parents, but at 5 years old, they forced her into a lake. She didn't want to swim. She made it mean her feelings don't matter because she was begging and screaming, don't. That wound affected all her relationships. So no matter how, somebody reads my story and they go, oh God, well, Lord, I'm a shame on me. I shouldn't even be complaining. This lady went through so much. No, my fingers broke. It hurts. Your legs broke. Okay. You might need it more than I need my finger, but it's still relevant, right? It's all a part of our own journey. So just, I hope I answered that. I know I went on a little tangent there, but.
Yes, you have. It's a wonderful answer. Thank you so much for sharing all of these learnings. I think in a way, I agree with you. I don't believe in small and big trauma. This is absolutely ridiculous. Trauma is trauma. It's such a subjective experience, what happens to us. It's so hard to understand how it impacts us. Who is one or another to decide what is small and what is big? We don't have a machine to measure trauma, like we don't have machines to measure other things. So in my view, yeah, if it's painful, if it's there, it remains in you like an imprint, then we see it still here in our adult lives. And I also agree that you can't really see the light and appreciate the light until you go to the darkness.
Yes.
So thank you for taking this journey within through the darkness of everything and coming out of it. And now, helping others to open up towards this possibility of healing themselves, of changing the way they function. And many, many thanks for your time today, for being here for all of us. And I wish you the best of luck with your launch. I'm hoping that the book is reaching as many people as possible and will enhance their lives, will help them make maybe the first steps in some cases towards self-discovery, healing, and personal growth. Thank you so much.
Thank you.